Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo Podcast, episode number 3. We have made it to 3 podcast shows. That's pretty good. We got something going here, I feel like. Now, this is the Wombo Combo, a competitive Dota 2 focused podcast show. Excited to be here once again. I'm one of your 2 hosts, BreakyCPK, as always, joined by BSJ. BSJ, how you doing, man?
Doing good. There's been a lot of fun activities, let's say, in the Dota scene with the current or recent qualifiers, and a lot of stuff to talk about today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's DPC officially getting started. Our first couple of shows were hyping up the season, talking about a lot of these roster shuffles taking place and everything, but we finally have gotten to see examples of a lot of these teams, and obviously we've had a lot of results that maybe were expected, but we certainly have had some also that were a bit unexpected on top of that. So that's just part of the discussion that we're going to be going over today. It will be mainly focused around the qualifiers. We are planning to be joined by a special guest today, MoonMeander. Of course, one of the teams that qualified out of North America, part of Fighting Pepegas. He'll be joining us to talk about his squad in about 15 minutes from now or so. So it's definitely excited to have him on the podcast in just a little bit here.
Yeah, he said he's got a pub, so he's in the middle of a game. So we'll see. I didn't see what the opponent lineup is. If it's a techies, we might not be seeing MoonMeander today, but yeah, hopefully his game ends swiftly. He said he's about 25 minutes in or so okay. Right now, so
we'll keep it on.
He should be here. I have faith in him that he can close out the game swiftly. But that's definitely one of the topics of discussion. Everyone, including you and I, I'll even say mainly me, expressed their doubts about the Fighting Pepegas. So some solid surprises as well as some solid disappointments in these qualifiers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. The Fighting Pepegas is really one of the interesting storylines, no doubt. Obviously, have had a lot of success to start the season, not only qualifying for the ESL tournament, but on top of that, now one of the 3 teams to qualify out of North America. But again, before we get too much into that, there are some topics I wanted to touch on first, and one that kind of led into the tournament itself. Now, we touched on this a little bit last week. We thought we knew, but it turned out that the official announcement wasn't out yet. And that ended up happening, I pretty much think, the day after we actually did the podcast. It came out officially. The slot allocation in terms of which regions got the amount of slots that they did. In the case of this tournament, they went with China getting 3, which no one was surprised by. But the other 2, certainly some debate, I think is safe to say, North America and Southeast Asia getting those 3 slots. That means Europe, CIS, and of course South America then receiving the 2 slots for the major. So naturally, this brings up a lot of discussion. This brings up some arguments. There's plenty of fans out there, let's say, of specific regions that are certainly letting their voice be heard. But how do you feel in terms of the slot allocation? Do you think this was fair for this first part here?
No, I'm kidding. Honestly, I think it was relatively fair. Like, it's a hard judgment call to make. You look at a team like J-Storm or Team Quincy that would have taken the 3rd slot in North America, or even going to even argue that Fighting Pepegas was supposed to take the 3rd slot. Whatever, it's like, is that team better than the 3rd best team in Europe that didn't quite make it? And quite frankly, NIP didn't look all that impressive to me. And so it's a tough call to make, but there's these popular these powerful teams such as Secret, such as the TI winning OG, that the Liquid team that hasn't re-signed yet, like the former Liquid team with Kuroki. These teams are just not in the picture. And I like that Valve kind of said, okay, even though Europe is the strongest region in the world, their 3 best teams arguably are just not playing. So why are we giving them 3 slots anyway? I think that this is cool to see that they will adjust to that kind of thing. Southeast Asia also looks like a very powerful region on paper. Yeah. And even though I'd never even heard of Team Adroit, I did watch them during the qualifiers, and they looked like a pretty solid team too. So I usually only have a problem if the 3rd team from the region that was allocated that slot just doesn't look like they deserve to be at this event, and yeah. I don't feel like that happened. It could be argued some other way, maybe that a different region deserves 3 slots.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a team that's like squeaking in that didn't deserve it. Last year, one of the majors had a team from NA, I believe, that just shouldn't have been there. It's hard to recall exactly, but this year I think they did a good job.
Kind of going off of the point that you made, I certainly agree with you that I at least hope that this is a show that Valve is willing to adjust, willing to adapt. As you pointed out, the X-Liquid, OG, and Secret out of Europe specifically, making a point that they're not playing in the first cycle. LGD also making a point. So, yeah, 4 of the Juggernaut teams are not playing this first major, which in itself is pretty crazy, and obviously that many more points and chance for prize pools left open at the actual event. But going back to the point about the seeding, that's how I feel about it. I think because those 3 teams specifically were left out, 100% it makes sense to me to just have the 2 out of Europe. Now, I honestly think the debate is more about whether or not CIS or Southeast Asia deserved it. And this might be a little bit of the NA bias, but this is why it's also pretty difficult, because you look at in terms of overall competition, I do think you could argue even Europe without those Juggernaut teams. Southeast Asia, CIS, are potentially better than NA. But when you look at the top 3 to 4 teams specifically in NA, it feels like that they are teams that would be deserving to go to the major over, say, the top 4 from Southeast Asia or CIS in this case, and of course South America on top of that. So I guess it's kind of finding that where you believe the spectrum should be in terms of, is it the overall competition or is it really the top heavy? And I think it's showing here that Valve went with this idea that there are more fans of the top heavy specifically in NA when it comes to giving them the 3 slots. So next cycle, when these Juggernaut teams come back for the European region, of course I expect them to have 3 slots. If they don't, something's really off. But I'm pretty sure they're going to have 3 slots. Then that's going to be the question of, does NA or Southeast Asia get that 3rd slot? Of course, that'll be dependent perhaps on the results from this first major, but we'll have to wait and see.
It'd probably be determined by the results of this major, even maybe determined by the minor, because what if the 4th team out of NA, what if Team Quincy or some like one of the other NA teams comes out of the minor, or what if one of the SEA teams comes out of the minor? I think that what Valve is saying is they would rather have that 3rd slot team be higher quality than have there be more contention for that 3rd slot. You know what I'm saying? So they'd rather have one solid team amongst a pool of one good team and 4 kind of meh teams in NA, and then compared to having a kind of step down team, but that's where the pool was, they're all equal. And I think that's overall better for the quality of the tournament. Is it overall better? That's, these kind of things are close, and since it's close, it's hard to argue with them. That's overall my opinion.
Sure,
it's hard to argue if it's close.
There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong. Well, there is. I mean, there would definitely be a wrong answer here. I feel like there would be some ridiculous things I could have done, but it is interesting too, because looking back at the interview with Quinn last week, we had him on the show. He made that point when we actually brought this topic up on how he felt, because these teams were out of Europe, that should be taken into consideration, and it seems to have played out that way. Now, unfortunately, as we know in hindsight, his team was just shy of qualifying for the major out of the North American region, which I think is fair to say one of the first big surprises that happened. So jumping kind of a segue there, we'll start with the North American region, and we'll start with that because that actually was a pretty big deal, I feel. Quincy Crew, stack of Samael, Quinn, also CCNC, Yoar, MSS, and SVG. They looked good in the group stages. They split their group stage match against the Fighting Pepegas. But, funny enough, they ended up losing a coin flip because they were tied. It ultimately came down to a coin flip, which is an interesting debate in itself. But they had a coin flip. Because they lost the coin flip, they had to play Evil Geniuses first, which, of course, they lost that series 2-1. They did make it a 3-game series, but a hell of a match there. And then they ended up playing J-Storm in the loser match for the major qualifiers. And then they lost that. J-Storm actually just outplayed them, from what I witnessed at least, quite a bit. That was last night as we were recording the show. So Quincy Crew, maybe not as strong, maybe a little bit overhyped. Is that fair to say, or is this just were they out of practice? What's the deal?
I was a little upset with how they drafted, I guess, against J-Storm. Whenever you're a better team, I think that, especially if you're new, when I say a better team, like a better team on paper, and whenever you're a newer team, the only way you really lose is giving yourself an execution threshold that's like way higher than the opponent. Like it makes you give yourself a draft that's harder to run. And like in the first game, Quincy or J Storm had a Timbersaw with no counters. Boom, like that in itself makes the draft really easy to play. The second game, they had a bad and Necro course with a Warlock team fight. Like the game is just easy. Like meaning when I say easy, it's like you're not going to lose because you misplayed is the point, right? You're going to lose because you either had you picked bad easy heroes into their heroes, but like they picked this last pick PL into like a ton of team fight. And you saw in both games that Quincy Crew had to do this crazy kite around the map, dodge them as much as possible. And then eventually J Storm just rammed it down their throats and you can't fight them. You couldn't kill Timbersaw. You couldn't kill this gyrocopter Necro with the Abaddon sitting behind them and the Warlock. Like it was just way harder for them to play Dota. And this meta has really shifted towards these offlaners, Omni Knight, Abaddon, Legion, who just sit behind your team and purge you. Like if you get gone on, you just save them. And they weren't drafting like that, which they had Omni Knight the first game, but when you get, no counters in a Timbersaw, that's a whole nother story there. But yeah, I think flukes like this can happen, and I don't want to say J Storm's bad. This doesn't prove to me, for instance, that J Storm's
don't blow up the roster. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Please, like Quincy Crew, don't freak the hell out. Because, but it sounded like last week during the interview, Quinn knew they were going to have some growing pains. Didn't know exactly how that was going to look, but he did know that it's expected. And it sounds like the team as a whole understood that, which is important to me. So moving forward, I think they'll still be fine.
Yeah, they should be, and again, I almost jokingly said that, but I don't believe that they're in that spot, because, again, they could still qualify for the minor. They're obviously still in a very good spot for that, and going to the minor could be a solid start to the season still, despite not making the major. It is a very tough NA region at the top side, as we pointed out. A couple things for me that stood out with Quincy Crew. I got the chance. I was actually doing official coverage for Group B, so got to watch all their Group B matches, and then obviously into the playoffs on top of that as a spectator. I do have to say a couple of things really stood out to me. One, and this is always, I don't want to say a fault, but it has been something I've made a point of or noticed when it comes to Quinn specifically or CCNC. In terms of his hero pool, it seems like it is a bit more limited than a lot of these top-tier mid players. As far as execution goes and skill level in that sense, I feel like he is one of the better mid players out there. But when it comes to his overall hero pool selection compared to, say, somebody like a Sumail, it is not as large. Now, there was one game specifically that came to mind where they picked an Invoker because they thought it made sense, and they actually had Sumail play it because that's not a hero that CCNC plays. So he's normally their mid player, but obviously with the Invoker pick, he went on Alchemist, I think it was, and yes. Invoker was instead of the hands of Sumail, which is fine. I mean, not that's ridiculous, but whenever you're kind of swapping up lanes like that from a game to a game in a very important environment, I feel like that could certainly play a role. Like if you were given a chance to all of a sudden play mid for one game just because of a hero made sense, would you feel a little bit uncomfortable, or do you not think that would faze you too much?
No, absolutely. I'll give a perfect example of a pub like 2 weeks ago. I played a mid Slark game, and I played terribly, even though I've played 740 games of Slark, because 3 of those have been mid Slarks. You know what I mean? The mid lane just operates differently from the side lanes, period. Like, I don't have any problem running my carry heroes in the off lane in like an aggro try or something, because the side lanes play very similarly. But when you're playing at this highest level, your farming rotations, what your role in the game is, all of these things change when you go from mid to safe lane and back and forth. And I don't remember the last time I've seen Quinn not go mid, right? Yeah. So you have Yawar, who's very, very limited experience on the off lane. Suddenly you have Quinn playing safe lane in a game. These are things that are just going to add up to you having, like, just not being, instead of at your 100%, you're kind of at your 80% or 85. And in Pro Dota, that's just, I mean, J Storm's not bad, right? I wasn't trying to shit talk J Storm. They're not a bad team. And suddenly you're dealing with Moo, who got second place TI with Timbersaw alone. Brax on Enigma, one of his best heroes. And it's just like, these guys have played hundreds of games like these, and you've played 10 in the last, 6 months kind of thing. And that's why it's just unrecognizable. Dota's so much about experience and understanding the kind of intricacies and the muscle memory of your specific role, your lane rotations, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to necessarily overhype this idea that, again, this team needs to rethink their roster or anything like that. It's just because ultimately there's a couple of best-of-3 series that they had to play, and just coming to losing. Again, they win 3 games against EG, then they did get 2-0, though, by J-Storm, which I do feel is certainly the surprising result. But as you pointed out, too, J-Storm certainly looks good in that result, and they are absolutely deserving. So, all right, Quincy Q, though, as mentioned, they do get a chance in the minor, so we'll obviously keep an eye on there. And now, if they don't qualify for the minor, then that's a little different, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Looks like MoonMeander said to me he's ready, and he just typed it in Discord. Okay. So we should have. He looks like he finished his pub swiftly, as we firmly believed in him here. So
okay, let me see. Let me get him on the call right here. I'm going to switch back to this graphic just to make sure that we're good. Want to try to make the production value as good at this time as possible. But, of course, MoonMeander, part of the Fighting Pepegas, one of the 3 teams, was technically the first team out of North America to qualify as they defeated J-Storm. They looked great. They honestly did, and I know both you and I, and more so you, as you pointed out,
yeah,
we're necessarily sold on this team. But I think, to be fair, it was more of the idea that they were – with Eternal Envy in the longevity. We know that they're skillful players, so maybe this result isn't the most surprising. It's just a matter, how do they keep it going throughout the season, right? So that's still fair to say, I think. But
to be clear, I never doubted their skill. Like we said, we doubted their ability to remain a team, their cohesiveness, the stability of the roster. So I guess really nothing I've said changes. Like the minute that they have a rough patch, I'd be curious to see what happens, and that's something I actually want to talk to Moon about coming up here, because that's just bound to happen, whether or not you just don't place as well at a major or you don't qualify, whatever it is. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to him about his team. It's nice to hear about the formation of the team, this kind of stuff. So
I believe I'm trying to get him on the call. Moon, are you there yet? Or
yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Nice. Hey, what's up, man? Do you have a webcam or no?
Yeah, let me plug it in really quick.
Okay.
Nice.
Gotcha.
Production value on point today.
Want to get that maximum production value here. No, but obviously, thank you for joining us, MoonMeander. Really do appreciate it. Looks like he's turning it on now, so trying to get that set up here as well. But welcome to the podcast, man. You're going to the major. How does it feel?
Feels good, yeah. Thanks for having me here. It's been a long time since I've been to one of those. I think the last one was Kuala Lumpur to qualify through the minor, actually. It was crazy. So it's the first time winning a major qualifier in a while.
Yeah, and we'll get one the first team technically as far as you guys defeating J-Storm right there. You guys played very well. Did you almost surprise yourself at how well you guys played, or is this what you kind of expected going in?
I think that we didn't actually play that optimally. I think we made a lot of mistakes. I think the thing that brought us to victory was the fact that we just didn't give up. Like I think both games, one game with down 20k goal, one game with down 10k goal. We lost a set of Rexes, but we just never gave up. I think that was key.
That game 1 against J-Storm, I was casting it, man. You guys had no place to win that game. It felt like you somehow managed. That was pretty crazy. But
Free from Alchemist, man, holy crap! We won against Free from Alchemist. How crazy is that?
Yeah, that was all 3 lanes. I want to say were lost in the beginning. It was a pretty rough start, but that feels like an Eternal Envy specialty, right? Like you're now playing with him, but his pass, he has a lot of these games where he never gives up. Is he constantly talking like throughout the game in terms of like keeping you guys motivated? Is that part of his style?
No, I wouldn't say he's constantly talking to keep us motivated, but I think when it comes to like the late game, he takes over. Early to mid game is up to me and the tempo controller and the supports, and then late game he just does his thing.
What's the distribution of like communication like on this team? Because I feel like there's some strong personalities. That was one of my main concerns when I saw your roster form, that there may be some people that have trouble like standing down to letting other people take control. So like how is that like discussed and formed for this team?
I think it's actually crazy. If you guys hear our Discord, it's just like whole mumbo jumbo. But I think we're kind of okay with it because we have 5 like NA Asians. So we grew up in like Asian household. Everyone's yelling all the time. It's always fast talking. So I guess we're all used to it in some sense. So it kind of works out for us.
Is that like a
if you want-
long-term thing you think, or is that something that you guys might want to trim up, I guess, in the future? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it will help a lot once we get a coach and org and the actual staff and management coming in and an actual boot camp. Right now we have none of those. We don't have an org. We don't have a boot camp.
Yeah.
My fiance is my manager.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your pick.
Hey, man, it's a good time. You got a fiance. You're going to a major, and it's funny you said you didn't qualify to a major for a long time through the qualifiers. This wasn't even close. It's not like you guys were the final team in or anything. Is it almost just like how was it so hard before? Did you ever feel like that when you have a tournament like this?
I think it was hard for me before because I just couldn't find the correct players to complement my play style.
Mm-hmm.
I always think that the way I play is always very. I don't know how you say it in English. Is gung ho is the correct term, but it means like just very ballsy.
Yes, you do.
Kind. And usually people is not in my team is not keeping up to this equal tempo or whatever. I end up feeding, but usually like it has to be like people playing to my tempo, and adjusting to me, which is why not many people can. I can play with many like the slower teams, or to say, but not to say that slow Dota is bad because some teams have created like perfect drafts around like slow, meticulous gameplay like VG Gaming, and it's just really hard for me to find players like that. And I think I finally found 4 other psychopaths who are willing to play like that with me in some way. Yeah.
I love
For sure,
it,
man.
I love it. Somebody in chat actually wants us to ask about. I'm actually curious too. The coin flip that took place. Apparently, it came down to a coin flip with you guys as well as Quincy crew, and so you guys won the coin flip, and that means you got to play J-Storm, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was my Vegas luck coming in, baby.
Let's go, baby.
Let's go, baby. Vegas 100 on black.
There you go. That's pretty funny how that works out. But again, it's it's just sometimes you split the series against them, so ultimately that's what led to that. And obviously, you got the matchup there. So EG, what do you think about EG? By the way, are they a scary team or are they overhyped? Put you on the spot.
I do not think they're overhyped at all. I think they're insanely scary. This EG is stronger. I would say way strong. I think personally, maybe people will disagree with me. They're way stronger. This EG than the last EG. Because they actually have a crazy dynamic going on. I think Baba is responsible for all of this. I know Baba is responsible. I know Baba. Basically, he said after watching OG win TI, I'm pretty sure he's gonna be like, "Yo, we need a mid who play makes." And then you see Abed buying Solar Crest on Invoker, not Midas Invoker, Spirit Vessel Solar Crest, not Spirit Vessel BKB Agonist trying to solo carry. No, he's all in for his Ana, which is Arteezy, and then they have offlaner who's very similar to. Matt Ramsey is always like running at the opponents, kind of like me, always running at the opponents. And Ramsey's a lot of carries have been recently moving to the offlane, and that's like the trend that we're seeing with Yawar and who's that guy?
Resolution.
Resolution,
Yeah.
that's right. But I think Ramsey's has a huge edge over those two players because Ramsey's has been playing carry in the style where it complements the way you play offlane, where it's just very in your face. He plays carry like that too. And not only that, but Ramsey has experience playing offlane in competitive Dota. And so I think that gives him a huge edge over the other two named players. And I watch Ramsey as offlaner. I really respect him. So that's why I think about the new EG.
Yeah, that says a lot coming from somebody who's been playing offlane for so long. I was wondering what your grand reasoning was for thinking this DG is better, and I think you're right. Like it kind of almost goes along with what you said about finding players that play with your style. And even though there's no style that's particularly the best, it is something about buying into everyone having this idea. This is what we build around. This is who we're playing around. And I guess my question would be, like, why is that so hard to find? Like, is it just that the people are rigid, that people are stubborn? Like, what is it?
I have a theory. It has to do with people's upbringing. That's how I feel. I feel like where you grew up from, how you played Dota 1, what region you played in Dota 1, all builds up to the kind of Dota 2 player you end up being. Your childhood, stuff like your memories built up, slowly mold into the player. And I feel like because I grew up in Asia, that place, Dota 1 was the most toxic and fast-paced, no objective whatsoever, so just killing. And then I came to North America when I was 17, and then I got introduced to Han, and that's where I started. I was in a team with PPD and BKit, and that's where they started teaching me about towers and objectives. I'm like, whoa, what is that? Whoa, this is cool. So that's why I'm a bit of mixture of both objective and killing.
Okay.
But your instincts are to kill.
Yeah, my basic inner ground layer, like my bottom line is just kill. But some
and there's just no removing that, right?
Yeah, there's no removing it. And some people, I think they grew up in North America. If they have a very sheltered home and they have a very nice family, everything is Gucci. They love playing Dota. They're very smart, and then they like to farm. They don't like to die, and then they have a very safe ground layer Dota, where the basic Dota instinct is not to feed, get farm, and play Dota like that. And I wouldn't like mesh well with someone like that, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's my theory. I'm not sure whether I'm right.
That's cool.
No, that's a great theory, and I mean, you brought it up, so I'll kind of work off of it too. The idea of there's a reason I feel like there's been a successful amount of Han players that have come from Han and into Dota 2 in terms of the transition there, because it feels like, and you can vouch for this perhaps, but Han was considered maybe a little more faster pace, more about getting kills, and so that's kind of brought
toxic.
over to Dota. More toxic,
Just say
yes.
it, just say it, Brady.
Sure, well, drop them G's, baby. Get throw the dumpster down.
Man. That game was so freaking toxic and so fast-paced. Like, it really weeded out the weak. The weak then the thing, and then only the strong survive in that game. Survival of the fittest. Yeah. So at Han players, when they come over, even when Han players come over to Dota, their playstyles don't change. Like, look at Alliance. The new Liquid.
Okay.
They're still like, yeah, man, let's keep running at them. But now they have more controlled aggression than they used to like a year or two ago. That's why I think they're improving really fast. I think that was their biggest problem, but now they seem to have fixed it with big props to probably Loda, telling them to scale it back a little bit when you're winning, not just throw every game.
They definitely went through a phase of quite a bit of that. Yeah, as somebody that watched a bit of Alliance, now the Liquid team. Yes, I can vouch for that for sure. That was tough sometimes. Somebody's actually asking about the captain on your team to clarify, because I noticed that the crown symbol was it was next to your name, it was next to Aoi a couple times. Is it kind of like a universal captain role for you guys, or?
No. AO is the captain. The reason why he passed to me the captain after the 18th pick was he told me what to pick, what to ban, but he needed to take a shit. So, so I'm not the captain.
We got to figure it out. Okay.
And then he went to take a dump, and I was just there's no confusion. AO is the captain. Trying to enter.
Gotcha.
I was not ready for that in the slightest, but hey, it's amazing. That's like a perfect example. It's not always like this, right? But how easy it is to just overanalyze dynamics within a team. Yeah. That's so funny.
Pretty much.
Oh, as a caster, that happens all the time during drafts where they there's even a game recent where they didn't even ban a hero, and we're sitting there thinking analyzing well, why would they not ban that here? It's like, no, he probably just went AFK or checked his phone out or something, and something simple. So yeah.
I have one last question about this meta. You obviously don't need to reveal too much. Do you like this Abaddon Omni Legion meta where it's in my opinion, less execution and more just about in terms of mechanics, but more just about playing together as a team, playing kind of straightforward, simple Dota? Is this your kind of meta, you think, for your team?
I'd say that sounds like the meta for almost a lot of metas. I think the hero just changes, but I think in general you should always play as a team, right? I mean, look at OG.
I guess it's
onto TIs, right? Different meta still, but the concept's the same as play as a team.
I'm saying when you have a hero like Axe, you need to get that 3-man call, to make that that smoke gank work or that big play. But for me, this meta doesn't feel like big plays, is what I'm basically saying. When I say it,
I see what you mean. All the big play heroes, Earthshaker, Enigma, they show up here and there, but
yeah.
It's because I think it's something to do with online qualifiers. Everyone's playing at 120% when you're playing from home, playing from online.
Okay.
Compared to when you play LAN. when LAN always all the big team fights comes out, your Enigma, Toby once cast yelling Black Hole, and then there's Earthshakers with Universe, 5-man Echo with the Roche. All this always comes out of TI. In online qualifiers, I think it's a different meta, so perhaps that's why you get all these heroes.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone's more relaxed at home, right?
That's true.
And TI stage, Jesus.
Little different, yeah.
Yeah.
A little different, I'm sure. So obviously that's still a long ways, but it's safe to say you guys are, of course, gunning for that eventually. But it's a great start to the season, qualifying for the first major. I want to wish you the best of luck, of course. Moon, any shout-outs, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, shout out to my teammates, AUI Brow, Eternal Envy, and
Who's that last
Snake
guy?
King.
God, that last guy.
And my fiance, who's being a really good manager. And thanks for having me here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Always good to talk with you, man. And obviously, best of luck in China. We'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so there we go. MoonMeander joining us. Always awesome to talk with him, and definitely, I of course have history with him way back in the Han days, and just seeing him right there and interviewing him right there, it's amazing. Honestly, the transition that guy has gone through in the last 6-7 years. And I was very entertained by his early days as a streamer in the Han days, and his playstyle and his never ever and his jumping off his seat whenever big plays would happen and his speeches. But he has certainly matured, it's fair to say, as most do when they get older. And I do wish him the best of luck, and I do root for him. Certainly. So it's fun to see, and obviously thanks again for him joining us there. So.
It is pretty funny how I was one of those people that always thought, like, how am I ever going to grow up, I guess, or, mature? And it's funny how that happens. You just stop being so volatile about your reactions, about how you handle things. You kind of just say, I've seen this before now. It's not that big of a deal. That's almost what I've realized is the core reason I've matured in a lot of ways is because I'm just not surprised by a lot of stuff anymore, especially in pro Dota or just the Dota game itself. You learn a lot of crap can go wrong. And even if something specific has never happened to you before, you can kind of tie it to something where it's like, I've been in this position. Like I remember something like this happening, and I see players like him, and it's, like you said, pretty crazy to see how far they've come. Like when you compare them 4 or 5 years ago, in terms of personality.
That's I have stories, several of those players, way back when, but that's for another time, perhaps.
Yes.
We want to keep this show moving, though. One last, actually interesting. Somebody in chat had kind of brought up this idea, and so I'm curious for what we think about this. If you're an organization like Cloud9, for example, some really big organization looking to get involved in Dota 2, right now. Would you rather go for Fighting Pepegas or Quincy Crew? That's tough.
Sometimes it is as simple as the team that qualified to the major gets that org. We've seen it in the past where if you qualify, suddenly you get an org. Is that necessarily the correct mentality for an org to have? I honestly don't know. I've never really been on that side of things. Yeah. But I personally think that Fighting Pepegas is proving themselves to be like a relatively cohesive, stable team in terms of coming back from really bad games. Is a big part of showing that you're not gonna. If there's volatility within a team, they can win easy games. Yep. But when you're winning these chaotic games, where if anybody gives up, you're gonna lose, kind of thing, or if anyone's not on the same page, you're just gonna lose. That says a lot about a team. So, it's tough. It seems more and more difficult for teams to get orgs nowadays. Do they wait till after the major? Like, does an org say, oh, if you get top 8 to themselves, if you get top 8, we'll sponsor them kind of thing. I don't think Team Quincy looks ready to be sponsored by a major org. Not only did they not qualify, but they didn't look particularly amazing. It's not like they got outplayed. I think they just didn't play well. So kind of weird to say that because I had huge expectations for that roster. And by no means am I saying, God, that just means they're never going to meet the expectations. It just shows that they do have a lot of ironing out to do.
Yeah.
And maybe an org thinks that they can help them do that. And then maybe they'll get one. You know what I mean? There's so many factors. It's hard. It's really hard.
Marketability, of course, you're looking at Sumail as one of the most marketable players in Dota 2 and even in esports to an extent. So I think from the business side, you could certainly still say Quincy Crew, but it is interesting, with them not qualifying for the major and neither one of those having an org. You figure both of them eventually are going to end up with one, so that's all in theory, but an interesting discussion to be had there. So eventually going to happen, though, but believe it or not, there were other regions that happened as far as these qualifiers go, so we spent a lot of time on North America when talking about the qualifiers, but now with the MoonMeander interview out of the way and all that discussion had, let's kind of glance over the other regions that, of course, played out here in the qualifiers. We'll start with China, of course, one of the 3 regions to get 3 teams, understandably so. China, just like most, is going through a lot of roster shuffle, a lot of the teams really changing to an extent, so it is hard to kind of follow it amongst all the other regions, and you kind of look at an event like this to get reminded, oh, that's right, this player's in that. That kind of happened for me with Team Aster, one of the 3 teams. You had Team Aster, Vici Gaming, and eHome were the 3 teams that actually qualified. Aster, you're looking at SCCC, Shuan, XXS, Baboka, and Fade. So, of course, that is a very strong roster, especially with SCCC, who is, according to this, playing the position of 1. I find that interesting. Of course, he comes from that mid lane back in his newbie days, but he had a horrible season last season. They didn't even qualify for a single major, I believe. Now he's found a new team, though, and starting strong is safe to say.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about this a bit in the previous episodes of the podcast. Just roles are changing, right? In terms of how the mid lane dynamics work, how the safe lane dynamics work. That it's not that crazy to see these 2 position players become 1s, these 1 position players become 3s. They just have a play style, and sometimes it's just best to say, hey, this play style works best for me in this role in this current meta. And SCCC was kind of always a very, I don't want to say he's not a playmaker, but he was the carry of the team. Like, he was known to be this game-winning mid laner. And right now, the carry hero ends up being that most games in terms of past the 20-minute mark. You have these void-type heroes that are just meant to win you the game. I'm not saying it's the most impactful role or most skill role or whatever, but it's just interesting how this is happening more and more. And I think you have to be careful with Team Quincy, for instance, when you have too many people doing it, like when you have CCNC moving to the safe lane just for even the 1 game, and then you already obviously have Yuar in his other role. It's like you got to find the happy balance of fitting your playstyle to the role, but also just putting in that sheer number of games in that role. Who knows how many games SCCC or Sumail have played carry in the past. Ramsey's obviously, like MoonMeander said, played competitive Dota as an offlaner. So that's a huge advantage if you're swapping roles, because there's so many things that I remember I played a high-level party queue game against the Sumail stack, pretty much Team Quincy. I've played like 100 Lina games, but I've never played a Lina game mid against 5 top 20 players. I've never done that. And it's just unrecognizable in terms of the dynamic of the game, the decisions you have to make, how long you have to farm, what your timings are, your adjustments you have to make to stuff that's happening in the game. It's very easy to play Lina, go hit some neutrals, get a Yules, go Yule somebody, stun them, kill them. Like, that's very straightforward. But the second that you're having to participate in fights before you hit your timing, all that kind of stuff, if you haven't played that hero in that role, in that situation 5-10 times, you're just going to look clueless. So yeah, we saw that a bit in the NA qualifiers, as we talked about. We obviously did a little bit of tangent from this Chinese qualifier, but the main thing I see in this Chinese qualifier is, Vici Gaming, same team, but even if these other teams are making different roster changes, it's pretty much the same players, right? It's the same thing we're seeing in NA, just new players playing on the same team. But it's no surprise that players like Baboka and Fade on SCCC's team, very XXS, very well-known players, and that's just typical beginning of the season stuff. Is what I would say. Going
through the rosters, I will say this is probably one of the more expected results. Royal Never Give Up is a very solid team. Monet, Setsu, Flyby, Dogfights, and Fenrir. They came up just short. They did make it to the playoffs, but they lost in both of their series. So but they'd be the kind of the only other one. But again, they technically got fourth place. So yeah, I think it's one of the more expected results for sure. Well, one thing that did catch me off guard, Vici Gaming, I had to do a double take because I noticed Paparazzi wasn't there, and I'm like, wait a second. Did some research though, and sure enough, I guess he changed his in-game name to Eurus is what he's going by now. So yeah, that is Paparazzi. He is still part of Vici Gaming. Because I was scrambling around like, wait, who the hell is Paparazzi playing for? That would have been something if he's still a free agent, but no, he is part of them. And then eHome, you got VT Faded, 897, Faith Beyond, Zinc, and Y. So just to give you an idea of who those rosters are. So those are the three teams out of China. Jumping over to Southeast Asia, the final region to get three teams. Again, at least the top two teams were pretty obvious, I feel. You got Fnatic as well as TNC. The third team, though, was, you pointed this out in the beginning of the podcast, Team Adroit. Yeah, Team Adroit, a full Filipino squad. Natsumi, Mac, Bach, Boombox, and CML. So, I mean, a couple of names you certainly recognize, Boombox specifically, but certainly not one of the teams you'd expected to get top three. They did, and so they're going to the major. How about that? They're going to be one of these dark horse teams, perhaps, at the event.
I would say the biggest disappointment to say maybe that could have taken their slot reliably was Geek Fam. Yeah. We had Raven, Ryoya, Cuckoo, Dubu, Zephyr. These are other than that team, none of these other teams are particularly amazing, I guess you could say. When I say amazing, it's like we really expected a lot out of them. It's not like these are bad players. You have a Winter Miracle stack. You have the KYXY stack. I mean, all these teams, you never really heard of the name itself. But, by no means is this region like an easy region. The bunch of very solid teams, but that's just kind of the first major, right? Is you get a bunch of these newly formed teams and you get these wild cards, and I really love to see. I haven't heard of any of these players on Team Adroit, so looking forward to. I watched I think two of their games. They have a very unique play style. It's like very them. I don't even know how to describe it. You'd have to watch it yourself, but you'd be like, yeah, this team is their own thing. And I like that. I like teams that kind of just embrace their own version of the current meta and kind of just stick to their guns about this is what we do best. And they definitely had like a signature, a personality. The team has a personality. Let's just leave it at that. Sure. And I look forward to seeing how that pans out for a newer, unheard of team.
Sure. I love to see that, and a couple of teams come to mind for me in terms of these up-and-coming teams that kind of just do their own thing within the meta. Gambit last season for me was in the CIS region was actually that. They had a pretty unique strategy that a lot of other teams almost kind of went after because they realized that they were having some success, at least in the middle part of that season. So fun to see. Team Adroit, definitely an underdog going in, but congratulations for qualifying for the major, and certainly will be fun to see how they play. Again, joining Fnatic and TNC out of Southeast Asia. So moving along, now we get the two teams qualifying from each of these regions. Of course, you have Europe, which as we do this podcast, it finished earlier today. And the two teams that qualified, we're looking at Alliance, the new Alliance squad. To clarify that roster, again, Nico Baby, Limp, 3-3, Hanskin, and Fata as their main support. And then you have X Alliance, or now Team Liquid. They're the other team to qualify as they defeated NIP in the lower finals. So Alliance did defeat Liquid 2-1 in the winter finals, which is also a fun series, and of course an interesting one with some storylines on it for obvious reasons. But they both ultimately qualify. Again, for me, pretty expected results here. Yeah,
they looked above and beyond the other teams. NIP, I don't know what's up. Like, I'm not here to talk trash. They look terrible. I mean, compared to what I would expect from that quality of a roster, I had huge high hopes for them as well. I would say out of all the qualifiers, they are my biggest disappointment. I view PPD very highly as a captain, Universe very highly as an offlaner. I view Gunner very highly as an up-and-coming mid. And, I don't know the other two players that well, but, what I think about PPD kind of transfers to them. He wouldn't play with them if they weren't worthy per se. And I would just watch their games, and they didn't just lose. They were getting handled by the better teams. Like, it wasn't a brawl. They end up coming out short 40 minutes in the game. They just got outplayed and outmaneuvered from minute 10 to 20-ish. And I'm just like, oh, well, that's usually the sign that the other team is just better. That stuff does not happen by coincidence consistently. Yeah. And that's, yeah, I don't know. That's just weird. I wonder what's going on there. But yeah, Team Liquid, Team Alliance, good looking teams. I really like the new Alliance roster. With, as you mentioned, just to make sure people don't get confused, the FATA roster, not the one from the last season. They picked very limited hero pool. I mean, I'm looking at the Team Liquid series against them. They picked Abad and Rubik Ogre all 3 games as their offlane and support duo. So that's going to be incredibly exploitable in a major setting.
Yeah,
that's something that can often easily work if you're a better team in terms of execution and skill. But in the qualifiers, it can work in the qualifiers. But will that work in the major? That is a whole nother ball game. Mm-hmm. That will not work in the major is what I'm saying. Will they be able to come to the major with more?
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. As a lot of these teams are going through a lot of roster changes, so they're certainly not unique in that sense. But they were the top team out of Europe to qualify, as we've mentioned going into this. A very, don't want to say weak, just a lesser region with the top 3 teams. You could certainly argue not participating in this first cycle. So, again, Alliance and Liquid, they are going to the major out of Europe. You jump over to CIS. A couple of very interesting storylines out of this one, actually. One, Na'Vi didn't even make it to the minor qualifiers. They're officially eliminated. Yikes. Did not see that coming. And then Virtus Pro didn't make it to the major playoffs. They actually made it to the minor playoffs, so we'll see if they ultimately qualify for the minor, but didn't even get to the major playoffs. So 2 of the top organizations in CIS, arguably in the world in terms of their prestige and everything. Virtus Pro, especially to me, is really the biggest one because this is a team that's had so much success these recent years. Obviously a much different roster, but man, that's what is going on here in CIS.
Yeah, to be fair, I guess to Na'Vi, the 2 teams that made it to the event were both in their group, but I don't really think, I don't know who this JFSHFH178 team is. You know, I've seen a couple of these names before for sure, but yeah, that's unheard of if you look at this Na'Vi roster.
Yeah.
And Virtus Pro newly formed, so by no means can you expect them to be clean, but I don't know too much history behind these other teams. Gambit is pretty much the same roster, right? Like maybe 1 or 2 new ones?
A couple new players. They don't have Afanage.
I definitely didn't recognize all these names.
Yeah, actually, Gambit is, now that I'm looking at it as well, they're actually completely different because Dahak and Afanage aren't on the roster. I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. Well, that's like, then what's, the Virtus Pro Na'Vi excuse? That's what I look at. Yeah. I want to confirm because I don't remember CIS rosters off the top of my head, but FNG was the only one. FNG and Shotchlow were the 2 I recognized. And I just don't get it, man. Dota's so crazy when you see this kind of crap, like Na'Vi not even making it to the playoffs and Virtus Pro not even getting a chance at the major. I mean, I watched Positive guys. They look really good. I thought they looked really good. Gambit looked solid, but I thought Positive guys look a step above everyone else when I watched the playoffs. Look forward to seeing that team at the major more so than anything. Because ILTW, I believe, was the guy who stood in for OG last year and just didn't look very good.
Yeah.
And now suddenly they looked pretty solid. So maybe this team, I've heard of Ghostic, I've heard of Misha. So there's definitely some well-known players on that team.
Yeah, Positive guys and Gambit Esports were the 2 rosters. Just to 100% clarify, Gambit Esports, Dream, GPK, Shotchlow, Sampire, we'll go with that.
XS Vampire.
Vampire. There you go. XS Vampire and FNG. And then Positive guys, ILTW, Aragon, Ghostic, Immersion, and Misha is their 5-man roster. So I'll say this. I would put money down. This to me is CIS in a nutshell, what happened this first qualifier. I would put money down that there's going to be 2 different teams out of CIS qualifying for the next major. Like this region, in the last 3 seasons, it's actually been Virtus Pro and then 1 other team. But in this case, with the whole Virtus Pro explosion, it's going to be super chaotic. This is probably going to be the most chaotic region throughout the whole season when it comes to teams qualifying. I would not be surprised.
I agree. That's a solid hypothesis for the season, I would say.
So that's CIS there, though, as far as those results go. Some shocking ones, certainly. And then it wraps up going to South America. Now, are they finished? I know. Okay, so they aren't actually 100% finished yet, but we do know one of the teams that has qualified, Beast Coast. Formerly infamous last season, of course, but Beast Coast with their roster bringing it back into this season. They did have to go 3 games against this now Pain Gaming squad, but Beast Coast are the first team out of South America to go. Certainly, they were the ones in SA that you would at least expect to get to the major. Pain Gaming in a good spot now to go on as well. They'll face the winner of this Incubus Team Unknown series that is currently even in Game 3 as we speak.
Yeah, Beast Coast, we fully expected them to be just heaps and bounds above everyone else. They got 8th place at TI. What do you expect, And Pain Gaming has a solid roster. I just like the fact that I can say that about some SA teams.
Right. That's
a nice
good
feeling, right? It's a region that's traditionally the first year or two that it was given slots was kind of just laughed at. So I now the next step is kind of to get past the NA barrier that we've created, where can we have teams that are not 3rd or 4th that are decent, and that's still not a thing. So that's the next step for this region. But I want to see continued success for teams like Beast Coast at the major. To really solidify South America's presence in the Dota scene, because they've proven that they can compete, but now can they be contenders? That's what this season of Dota is all about for this region.
100% agree. This season is, will there be more than just maybe the TI run that we saw last year? Will they have some success even throughout the majors? And then that consistency. So not to put all the pressure on Beast Coast specifically, but they're the one team that we certainly expect right now to be the saviors of SA. The ones to really bring the region into the competitive Dota 2 scene, certainly. But they have made progress. It is good to see. And, there's a Southeast Asia comes to mind as another region that certainly went through these growing pains early on, too. And now here we are. They're getting 3 spots to the major, and deservingly so. So that's the evolution, and expect it with South America in a couple of years to come. But Beast Coast going. We're still waiting on the final team. By the time if you're listening to the recorded version of this, you probably know it by now. But again, Pain Gaming in the likely spot. We'll see if they get there as well for the major. All right, that leads us to the minor qualifiers. So again, with this format, it was really interesting how they tied in both the major and the minor qualifiers together. The one thing I will say on that, now that it's been played out, I really wish they just went with the international format that they've done in the past for qualifiers, and that's a Swiss format, not a Swiss format, a round robin with all the teams. Because I feel like, especially with so much on the line here, considering it's for both a major and a minor, the fact that some of these teams don't even get the chance to play another team seems a little off to me. So I would really rather have a best of 2, 10 teams maybe limit in each region that get to play one another. You could even down it to 8 at that point if that would help with the scheduling. So I hope that's something that maybe Valve will look at. Outside of that, I do like the flow of this event. It's a little unique. It's a little confusing for some, but I think we'll get used to it over time. That's the one adjustment I would make, though. So I don't know if you had thoughts on the format itself.
Yeah, my overall adjustment, I guess, would be that if you're getting eliminated from contention, which is between major or minor and like elimination, in this case, I'm seeing Infamous versus No Ping in one of the groups. If you're going to make like 3rd, 4th, that big of a difference where you're just out of the picture if you get 4th and they tie, you should have a best of 3. That should be a best of 3 tiebreaker. That was a best of 1 is what I'm highlighting. That's just because you're not playing all the teams in the tournament, because you're playing a best of 1 tiebreaker. That's a little more variance than I would like to have for this big of a thing. You know what I mean? I think they'll refine and fine tune this whole process, but I overall, I like the flow of everything. And I think that it was just too much for a team to barely not make it to the major last season, then run through an entire minor qualifier again. So now in this case, it's almost like an extra losers bracket to the major qualifier rather than having 2 separate ones in terms of how it feels. What day does the minor start, actually? The minor qualifier?
So we're recording this here on Tuesday night. It starts tomorrow. I'm actually covering one of the matches tomorrow, I think, for NA. So
I knew it was sometime this week. I wasn't sure if it was tomorrow or Thursday.
Yeah, no, they keep it going. It's Wednesday. And
Yeah, no,
Thursday.
that's good. That's what I mean. It feels like one solidified qualifier. It's almost like an event where you have that 1 or 2 days to process, to go over, to to trim up any mistakes, and then move to the next portion of the event.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot better. I think that this is just better.
So the minor qualifiers are set up. Again, not much to say about that, honestly, other than it's 4 teams in each region that came out from the initial part of these qualifiers, and they play double elimination. So it's just a straight up double elimination tournament. Of course, 1 team from each region advancing on, and then in a sense, it is that then extra last qualifier for the major, as you're pointing out, who will be the 16th team to join everyone else in China. But of course, the minor, excited for that, and we'll preview more of it, of course, as we get the teams and everything and towards the event. But Dota Summit 11, that's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to have a live audience, their biggest prize pool they've ever had at $300,000. Obviously, I don't want to go conspiracy theory here, but man, Quincy Crew, they threw the majors because they just wanted to go to Summit and then, win Summit and then go to the major on top of that, right?
More money,
have some fun. Yeah, what? No, I doubt that's what they actually did.
Pool party.
The Summit event is certainly a fun event. I know both you and I have had the chance to attend, so looking forward to that certainly already. But I think that leads us to a conclusion. I got a good, just about an hour-long show here. Talked about plenty. Joined by an awesome guest in MoonMeander. So big shout out to him once again for joining us. BSJ, final words. Anything else?
Yeah, I just want to thank all the live viewers for contributing and asking questions. I enjoy the little bit of interaction that we get to tie into this, and I love this part of the season because we talked about it before, that we get to kind of theory craft what's going to happen, and now I love to see all the disappointments and all the pleasant surprises. It gets me every year, and I'm really happy during this time of year. So I look forward to seeing who makes it to the minors for next week's episode, so we can talk more about who really just trying to cash in on that big prize for the extra, minor win going to the major.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun event, and that the minors actually November 7th through 10th, so it's still about a month away itself as the actual minor event. But next week's podcast, of course, we'll recap the minor qualifiers, and we'll see what else is on the docket moving forward. But always busy throughout the DPC season, even off events that take place outside of DPC. There's always going to be plenty to talk about here on the Wombo Combo. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode 3 once again. I was BreakyCPK, joined by BSJ as my co-host. Big shout out yet again to MoonMeander and their success also for going to the major and joining us on the show. We'll see you guys next time. Have a good night. See you next week. It should be back to Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. That's our usual. We'll let you know if anything changes. But see you guys next week.